Good night, the audience. Good night. So this will be the sixth chapter of the Game of Thrones saga, in which I describe both from theoretical perspective and analysis, but also, and perhaps more importantly, by giving examples of my real life. I describe the Game of Thrones phenomenon. And as I said, this is a political phenomenon of tremendous importance, and the phenomenon is the transfer of very young men from a country to another country after they already demonstrated sexually deviant behaviors, mostly pedophilia. And as I said, Israel and these people are all their life they are under the I would say the aegis. I learned of the Israeli intelligence. I learned this term under the aegis. I mean from the under the Haggis also, yes, Chitul Metunaf, but yes, but I mean, the source. I mean, the first time I've heard this kind of like a term, and probably the only one is from the response of President Eisenhower, I think, to the U2 scandal, you know, in which like a spy plane was lost above the USSR, of a type that was unacknowledged by the Americans, and so like I mean the USSR said, I mean, hey, I mean like what the fuck is okay? What are you doing? And like the American president, I think it was Eisenhower. I'm not sure. I'm not that versed in the history of the United States. I think it was Eisenhower. He said something like, I mean, yeah, it's like an air balloon, it's usual. I know everything that, I mean, there's kind of like a while ago I've seen like a nice thumbnail in YouTube, like you see like I mean all sorts of like alien spaceships that I mean, and under the category of like air balloon like I mean, but you just I mean under air balloon, but then you see an air balloon, but then it's like a categorized as UFO something like that. Funny. So he said like, yeah, sure, air balloon, whatever, because it was certain that because I mean the Russians, they made a trick. I mean, in their initial response to the situation, they were a little bit ambiguous to allow the possibility of understanding that these things were completely wrecked on USSR soil. It was a very high-flying bird, a very high-flying spy plane. So it's kind of like the first reaction of the USSR was kind of like ambiguous, to allow the people of both sides to understand that. I mean, it's like something it's something like a UFO was wrecked on their place, like UFO, not of like from the aliens perspective, but just I mean it's kind of from the aviation perspective. Like I mean, a flying weird thing of unknown origin crashed in their place. I mean, so the initial reaction, I mean, was termed like I mean specifically to allow this interpretation. It was ambiguous enough to allow this interpretation. So Eisenhower, I think, thought, okay, so the thing wrecked on their place. I mean, but I mean, they cannot understand. I mean, presumably it's very high flying, like super high flying. So they don't use today the U2, but they are successor to this thing. Like I mean, it's still being used, probably over Israel as well, I guess. But I mean, I don't know. Just I mean to be clear, I don't know of any such a thing that was ever used by Israel. Nothing at all. I mean, so I mean, it's not like a metaphor to any kind of like Israeli capability. Again, I'm always kind of I try to be very very reserved when I speak about Vyzint things, because my military profession was in the Vyzint materia. So I don't want so I mean. And much of the discussion in this series actually one in my military service, but I mean, again, I have no notion of speaking about Vyzint capabilities of Israel at all, or of any other country. It's not the issue. The issue is the political thing. just the disclaimer. I don't want, the police to be knocking on my door to say, well, why do you disclose secrets from your military service? So it's not the issue. So anyway, you heard the zombies. They don't like me to speak, but the robot will speak. He will speak. I assure you. I assure you. And if this will escalate to violence, the retaliation will be worldwide. Not against the zombie, and not against the trash can where the zombie lives. Retaliation is against the blue planet. Not against the zombie, and not against the trash can. If the zombie misbehaves in the trash can, the blue planet that created the trash can is punished. Immediately and worldwide, without discrimination. I always cite, the drill sergeant from Full Metal Jacket. We are not racist. You are all garbage to us. Blacks, whites, yellows, reds, you are all garbage to us. You are all garbage to us. The zombie misbehave in the trash can, the blue planet pays the price. Not the zombie and not the trash can, the blue planet. And it's not new, it was like that 100 years ago, and it's still like that. The zombie misbehaves in the trash can, the blue planet pays the price. You are all garbage to us. Literally so. Pieces of shit. The zombies misbehave in the trash can, the blue planet pays the price. Anyway, I opened the door to get some air. We need to refresh the air in this place. Anyway, so just to complete the story, so the US president saw that by the Americans still use it until this day. But not the U2. They have successors to U2. The idea is like a very high-flying spy plane. Of course, during the 60s, they started to use satellites, so this was a much safer alternative to the U2, but for some reason they still use it. I don't know why, actually. I don't know. But I know that they still use these things. Obviously the resolution could be much better than that of satellite because it's lower. Just, the lower the thing is it's really simple, and it's true. By intuition, also, just, that's the way it is. That, the closer the sensor is to the ground, the higher the resolution. It's trivial, it's so, and it's true. So maybe just because of that. But they still didn't have the satellites. It's before even the Sputnik, I think. And so they used it for spying purposes over the USSR. But from the reaction of the Soviets, it was kind of like an ambiguous reaction that allowed the interpretation that the thing completely crashed. So the Eisenhower said, air balloon crashed to your ground or whatever, the usual air balloon thing. So then Khrushchev returned with another kind of public message. He said, the American president, just responded with some very, very funny, Khrushchev had a funny way of speaking. Of all the leaders of the Soviet party, he was the one that had funny ways, humorous, kind of like an old, like an old, Russian grandpa, סבא חורף כזה, מצחיקול, אז הוא, סבא חורף מצחיקול קצת הוא היה. אז הוא אמר, so he said something like, what a funny response regarding, the UFO that crashed in our lanes, because here is the fucking pilot, because the pilot was still alive, it was not completely crashed. And they had living pilot of the thing. So then, so the Americans were like, well, תראו, תשמעו. תראה, תשמע. Well, Well, I mean, we. So the president, I think it was Adner, said something like, I mean, that like it said like so the pilot of this aircraft acted under the aegis of the president of the United States of America. So that's where I learned this. Maybe I mispronounced how they say aegis, but I mean, probably so. But I mean, because I mean, I've only I remember that I mean the usage of this term only from this particular incident. Like I mean, that's the only place that I remember that I've read this kind of like term. Anyway, where were we? I mean, it's a funny episode. Like I mean, it was actually, I mean, and also I mean, it was quite like unusually I would say. Unusually like funny. I mean, mostly when you think about the Soviets, I mean, you don't think about funny. I mean, maybe it's like a misconception. Maybe they were very funny. I mean, but mostly it's not what you think about them. Like, I mean, it's not like the thing that you, I mean, imagine. But this was actually very funny. Like, I mean, from the Soviets and Khrushchev, like, like the way that he handled the situation. But eventually the pilot was returned to the United States. I mean, probably in exchange for a spy, I guess. I mean, that's what, they always had spies. Like, I mean, so I mean, there was always like a pool of like of, like assets to return in return of like other things. The Cold War was funny actually. I mean, I kind of understand the people that miss. Some people miss it, and there are absolutely like museums of of the USSR, like even some kind of like live action museums where you kind of like I mean when you reenact like being part of a gulag or something like that. Some people find it funny. I must say that I mean personally I speak quite a bit about my predecessor in this channel. I mean he's like a character that I mean is that, and I should say that I had several predecessors in the 20th century. But I mean, mostly when I say predecessor, almost always I speak about a specific person that I know almost nothing personal about him, which is a shame. But I mean, I know a lot about, I mean, his profession, like what he actually did, like I mean, the actual, like the mission, and I speak about him quite a bit. And sometimes I envy him. Quite a while ago, I recorded a video in which I compared I compared myself to him, like, I mean, in kind of like, I guess in dramatized way. But I mean, sometimes I am envy of him because, I mean, like the context of his mission was the Cold War, admittedly later stages of the Cold War, not early stages, later stages. Actually, my grandfather, Yaakov Choropoulos, which is mentioned in the Zygote of Ur saga, in this channel, which is also very, very commanded, may I say, he was, I mean, I'm not a Kerub, but a kind of like predecessor doesn't necessarily need to be a Kerub. I mean, he was, I would say, a spiritual predecessor, my grandfather. And he acted like in the earlier like, phases of the Cold War. But I mean, the ones I consider my predecessor, I mean, so he acted like in later stages. And I mean, sometimes I really, I mean, envy him because I think, I mean, both of us, I mean, forced to act like to be like to be part of like international spy games that just by the fact that this is our lives, like, I mean, not just by kind of like inclination or something like that, but because just I mean that was the life around us. I mean, you understand that? I mean, all the knowledge that I have regarding the intelligence services of the world and the Israelis, I mean, it's something that was forced on me. I mean, it was never my intention to be that guy. It's like, and they disgust me, like you disgust me, wherever you are. I mean, but I mean, it's like it's like the life of the prophet. I mean, it does not choose like where to be born. But I mean, having said that, I mean, I think it's actually was nicer. I mean, during the Cold War, and much of what he's done was actually in the context of the Cold War, but this is discussed in the Bicycle Saga and in many other videos in this channel. And today, I may not be offended, but I think that the end of the Cold War marked a significant, started a process of significant reduction in the human capabilities of this world. Now, I'm not the only one that said it. It's like, just to say that this is a known notion. It's like, I did not invent it. So, and many people say it, that human was degraded significantly, not just because of the end of the Cold War, also because of increasing reliance on SIGINT. SIGINT is not new, but to a point that almost everything is SIGINT. And computer hackers, and כאילו האקרים וזונות, זה האקרים וזונות. And later I understood that this actually, this process, completely real process, and acknowledged by many people, like all over the world, that it's still happening actually. That it's a real thing. Like the intelligence people of the world became tremendously stupider, and they lost their human capabilities to tremendous extent. Much later, I understood that it's not just because the end of the Cold War, although it contributed significantly to this process, and not just because the prominence of SIGINT, and in general, whatever is that. Today, it's like under the category of cyber. I don't really like this category, even though I worked in a cyber company. But I kind of like hate this. I don't like this term because it's like an empty shell. Whatever you mean. But the prominence of SIGINT and of computers, computer hacking in general. But later I understood that it actually relates to the T as well. That that was a purge during the 1980s, like what's going on right now. But a huge purge, and many people all over the world died. Most certainly in Israel. In Israel, tremendous amount of people died, and this, tremendously, influenced the fact that, that from the 1990s onwards, the Mossad is actually an American or semi-American body. It's partly controlled by the Americans. Like they lost their, and it was like the crown jewel of the state of Israel for a long time. And they completely lost it. But this is discussed in many other videos, and like as a punishment. And the Shabak is just made of barely somewhat humanoid creature, barely sentient creature, like these people, barely sentient creatures. And so the process of stupidization was not just because of the end of the Cold War and the problems of SIGINT, but because of the purge, in which, בואו נשים את זה על השולחן, כל האשכנזים מתו, ומה לא נעים להגיד, אבל לא אמרתי את זה, אבל מה אתם רוצים? זה האמת. כל האשכנזים הנאצים שאכלו את התי נקברו, ומה נשאר? לא אמר, I didn't say it. It was a clone. The clone, we always think that I'm a clone, so the clone said it. Okay? I didn't say it. אבל זה נכון, מה לעשות? הכרובים הרגו את כל האשכנזים הדוחים, המגעילים האלה. והם היו כל המוח בישראל. אבל הם היו קקות, אז הכרובים רצחו את כולם. ומה נשאר? המיץ של הזבל. תראו, זאת המציאות. מה, אני אשקר לכם? זאת המציאות. anyway, זאת המציאות, מה אפשר לעשות? הם היו חלות מטונפות, אבל כן, מה, זה... בלי כל הפרידמנים האלה, אז מה נשאר לך במדינה? תחת. זאת האמת, מה לעשות? זאת האמת. פח אשפה מטונף, מה לעשות? הם עוד באירופה היו סקפטיים. הפרידמנים עוד באירופה היו סקפטיים. הם היו מומחים בפסיכולוגיה, הם היו אישית, כבר הכירו את פרויד ואת יונג, ובאמת היה להם ראש לפסיכולוגיה. הם המציאו את כל הטריקים והשטיקים האלה של השיטה שלהם, שמה שמצחיק זה שמתישהו, at some point I understood that משהו, like, you know, the psychological method that they use, like in the Shabak, they don't even know how it works, and they don't even know how to implement it. Like, they forgot it, like, I mean, this is like, I mean, it's like a post-apocalyptic society, like, I mean, much of what they do, like, with regards to the thing that this is actually described at length under the Israeliana saga, a series of 3 videos that I recorded a couple of months ago, in which I described at length, like, the psychological method. And at some point I understood that today they don't even know, I mean, what they do. I mean, that, I mean, they lost the ability to, they don't know, I mean, they just, I mean, inherit all sort of, like, I mean, corpus of knowledge from the Ashkenazim that, I mean, that the Kerubs, like, I mean, cleaned from this, from the place during the 1980s. And so they inherit some of the stuff was completely lost. But some other things, like methods, were inherited, but they cannot fix it, or they cannot even, like, change it, because in order to change something, you need to know how it works. And they lost some of the knowledge of, like, how it works, lost. So they just, I mean, but they still have some kind of ability to use this kind of method, but in a very crude way, and without any way to change it. If it doesn't work, they just repeat the same thing again and again, so maybe it will work. And they can't even, like, and they cannot adjust it or, like, you know, improve it. Just a post-apocalyptic society, you know, that they inherited technologies from, you know, from deceased, like, you know, ancestors, and they don't have any kind of theoretical knowledge of, like, what's going on. So, I mean, but they can still, you know, sometimes, you know, like, you know, spin the manuela or press the button, I mean, and to see some results. So that's what they do, you know, they spin the manuela, you know, and press buttons or move levers, but they have no idea what's going on. Like, I mean, just to say, this is the Shabak, you know, and these are the people. They don't even know, I mean, they don't even, I was shocked when I understood it. They don't even know, I mean, what they're doing. Like, I mean, like, I want to say God forgive them because they don't know what they're doing, but I mean, sorry, I can't get these words out of my mouth. Don't forgive them because they don't know what they're doing, and they should know what they're doing. But they don't. Like, many times they just, I mean, they use it as, like, post-apocalyptic relics, you know, that they were found, like, you know, in kind of like in like an atomic shelter, like, you know, behind, like, under, like, you know, tremendous amount of debris by people that are, you know, like for, you know, candidates to Leibovich, like, you know, sort of like, I mean, half monks, half mutants, you know, that have, like, they don't know mathematics, they barely know how to read and write, like, if at all, and, like, they found some, you know, like, pieces of, you know, electricity from, like, from the pre-apocalyptic time, and they have no theoretical knowledge of, like, how it works and what to do with it. But I mean, sometimes, but after, you know, they just, I mean, play with it, and some get electrocuted and die along the way, but others, I mean, survive. So when they see that, I mean, it creates some stuff, so they can just, I mean, take it and use it, like, in all, like, in kind of, like, you know, childish way. So that's the way that the Shabak is using much of the psychological method. They just inherited that from the Ashkenazim that, I mean, that went kaput, you know, during the 1980s because the Kerubs didn't like them. So this is Israel. I mean, this is Israel. And that's, I mean, that's where I live, you know, Jurassic Park, you know, like a land full of prehistoric animals, you know, stupid, predatory, noisy. I mean, I really miss the Cold War. What can I say? I mean, at least, I mean, there was, I don't know, more, you know, sophistication, you know, I mean, you know, with all of, you know, sexy robot spies, you know, like, you know, like in Austin Powers, you know, and, but really, I mean, there were sexy robot spies, and, you know, and, kind of like, you know, international, you know, sophistication, you know. I mean, yes, the real James Bond of the world were all pedophile scumbags. I do not delude myself, like, you know, yeah, I mean, they were always like that. I mean, not always, but certainly during the Cold War. They were the scum of the earth, and pedophile goons just like now, and worse. But I mean, there was kind of like, I mean, a level of intellectual sophistication about it, like, you know, sophistication about it. I mean, and now it's just Jurassic Park, you know, just, I mean, this is it. Bah, that's where I live. This is my world. Jurassic Park. But as I said in the previous video when I mentioned all of that, actually probably his mission was more difficult because הפרידמנים האלה היו חילות שלא, עדיף את הברברים האלה מאשר את הפרידמנים. כי אין דבר יותר מסוכן משכל, ואין בישראל שכל בכלל. ואז היה. And they were, the Kerbs didn't annihilate them for nothing. You can be sure. But all that is discussed in many other videos. So where were we? But I kind of I reiterate on the issue because it's related to the Game of Thrones institution. Because the Game of Thrones institution enacted, before the 1980s, just to be sure. It's kind of a thing that it's a long tradition in Israel. Very, very long tradition. But it as well, suffered from tremendous degradation of quality. So these are, it didn't stay the same. But this degradation is related to, again, three kind of factors. And one is just, the annihilation of the Israeli intelligence during the 1980s. And it should be said that a large part of the KGB and the FBI and the CIA also, were annihilated at the same time. So, but not to the extent that it happened in Israel. So partly it's that, and they became post-apocalyptic goons. And also the end of the Cold War that, degraded the intelligence services all over the world because, most certainly in Europe, like, in Western Europe, that, they practically do nothing at all. They just do nothing. They received the worst hit, after the Cold War because they now just don't do anything at all. Just practically nothing. Just... I don't know why they even exist. They just don't do anything at all. And the issue of the SIGINT, the prominence of the SIGINT, that this is like an ongoing thing. It happened, it started during the 1940s and it's still ongoing, but over time it's as a cumulative effect that almost everybody is either hackers or prostitutes. There isn't like much other things to do besides writing propaganda, which is a kind of prostitution in many ways. But it's mostly that. Just pedophile programmers and prostitutes that at some age, become propaganda writers. What can I say? This is reality. So the Cold War was fun. Yeah, certainly it was fun. So, it's unbelievable what kind of world I live in. Really, dinosaurs all around me, shouting, and, threatening, intimidating each other, stealing, raping, and, and sometimes I ask myself, do you even know humans? You always thought of yourself as a human, and you thought of yourself as, as a person that have, a good, understanding of humanity. Although I studied, in the Amirim, honorary programs of the humanities in the Hebrew University, the best, Bachelor of Science in the humanities that exists in Israel, and at some point, I'm 40 now, and משבר גיל 40 שלי, זה לא סביב השאלה, האם אני עדיין נמשך לאשתי, או האם כדאי לבזבז את הכסף שיש לי על פרארי. לא. The question is do I even know these guys? What is where do I live? What is this world? It's what is this thing? What is this place? What is this noisy place? What is this place? Maybe I was delusional, about the thought that I know anything about the world, because, what is this place? It's just full of shit, shitty people with mouths and tongues. Anyway, we wanted to speak about the origin. I mean, to describe the Game of Thrones phenomenon. And many people, I mean, kind of like, I mean, understood the twist that is going to happen, because I guess both because, I mean, people starting to kind of like get used to my style, so they can predict this twist, and also because I spoke about it in hints, and also because I spoke about it like in, not for the record, but maybe some people can have like their ways of like listening to it. So I mean, the important stuff is not the twist or the drama, but I mean me conveying the truth. And so whenever, and I like to dramatize my messages. I mean, even if you just, I mean, listening to me like from like, not from just, I mean, the last couple of days or weeks, I mean, you probably already understood it, but I mean, it was always like that. But it's just this is my way. I mean, kind of like, maybe literary affiliation. But whenever there is kind of like a conflict between dramatization and, my objective of conveying the truth, of course, the truth always wins. I mean, the important thing is that people will be able to understand the truth in the most truthful way that I can from my words. So I will say that, I mean, so I'll probably, I try to be as clear as possible regarding, I mean, where do we continue from here? So yes, people understood that, I mean, I'm not really going to speak about my military service, but about my high school and junior high days. That are to some extent, it was the beginning of a military service in ways that I will explain in a minute. But I mean, yes, this is where we are heading. Speaking about my time in junior high and high school. Now it should be said that I almost never spoke about it since the beginning of this journey, for some, I mean, discovery journey, since that where I always record my thoughts. Not only YouTube, but I mean, before that, Evernote, and Facebook. And so, it started almost 5 years ago, and this actually, I almost never spoke about this time. Almost never. Though I understood that it's related to the Game of Thrones phenomenon, but for all sorts of reasons, I almost never spoke about it. I have spoken quite a bit about earlier times of my life, like my primary school days, and even earlier than that. And even quite recently, I've spoken about it, and about my childhood in Ramat Aviv Gimel and all Ramat Aviv. And this is actually very, very interesting, but I'm not going to speak about it now because I've already spoken about it in the past, and it's not incredibly important for the Game of Thrones phenomenon, because the Game of Thrones phenomenon starts typically at high school. High school is the time where this phenomenon starts. Now, admittedly, I mean, it's kind of like more interesting. It's not very interesting to speak about high school from this perspective, I would say. It's more interesting, I would say, to speak about, like, the military service, per se, starting the age of 18, and, the people that I already mentioned their name, Yoav Tzobel, Boris Dogadov, Adar Steinhardt, Gil Volbrum, Ariel Ben Choresh, Ezra Och. These people are more interesting. I mean, certainly, objectively, they are more interesting, but also more interesting from the point of view of, like, the political phenomenon. And probably I'll do it at a later episode of this saga. But I mean, since this became like a rigorous examination of the phenomenon, as opposed to just one video or something like that, or like a brief discussion that I already held a couple of days ago, but it wasn't uploaded to YouTube. I do understand that. I mean, we should actually tackle the issue from its start, from its beginning, and its beginning is usually high school. So, and the only high school that I can speak about, in authentic way, is my own high school and my own experiences. So that's what I'll do. I mean, I'll speak about it with the hope of exemplifying the political phenomenon and how it came to be, and what you can, and how it explains like later behavior of these people. But it might not be, as interesting, I would say, as I mean, you might not find it. I mean, it might not be as interesting as, I mean, I would say, discussion of these people. I mean, in the military. I mean, not exactly these people. I mean, actually different people, because I mean, people of this kind doing the military service. Just, I mean, and children are not generally, children are not that interesting. I mean, as adults. I mean, unless you are, what you are. But yes, we should. I mean, if we really want to rigorously discuss it, the best time is to discuss high school. To discuss high school. And it will be also something new to me, because just I never spoke. I don't remember ever speaking about it, like, in any of like the capacities of, from the start of this journey since 2019. So it's like an even new material, even for my for my most devout fans that, I mean, listen to everything that I said in the last 5 years. Even them, I mean, even they will hear new stuff now. But there is one thing that is, we should put on the table right now. Most probably, not most probably, I mean, with all certainty, the situation of my life is much more complicated than the usual Game of Thrones phenomenon. Because it's not just that, I mean, presumably, just a normal person from society can be part of like societies where, these people are mostly located without even knowing about it. And this can happen either by mistake or just, I mean, intentionally so, because, I mean, the whole idea is that it's a secret. And that, at least, from what you see, from like, from the visible part, it's just, like regular units in the military or regular high school or regular anything. I mean, they don't speak about it, like, they never speak about these things. Like, it's the first rule of Fight Club. You don't speak about Fight Club. So they never speak about it in their life. Like, it's something that you just never speak about in your entire life. They have ways to give clues to each other, of course. But, they never speak about it at all. So, you could just be one of them without knowing it. Either by mistake or just because it can be done. Like, it's possible. Like, and presumably maybe why shouldn't it be like that? Because these are all, kind of like, groups in society that they are normal, like they are comparable to other groups. So people that do not belong to the phenomenon could certainly find themselves like in companies like where these people work, or military units where they serve, or high schools, and never know about it, anything at all. Never know about it. And maybe it happens quite a bit. Maybe it's normal. I don't know. And it's not really important right now. But this is not my situation. My situation is much more complicated, and I admit that I do not know all the details. I do not know all the details. Because my history is more complicated and is much more complicated. It's not just a case of mistake, or just, they didn't have enough, like, student in the class, so, they just, filled it with another guy that is not of the Game of Thrones, just another boy, from the same city that is not part of this phenomenon, and, presumably, this boy can never know that this is the situation, because, nobody will ever speak about it. No, it's not the case. This is not the case. Or, maybe, I served in Tisha Chamot as a programmer because they just needed the programmer, and, they couldn't fill up the ranks just, with the Game of Thrones, candidates, and so they took just a normal, programmer, from the military, from the pool, from Amram. Yeah, so, presumably it could happen, and this kind of programmer would never know anything about it, like, because nobody will ever speak about it. And so, but this is not exactly the situation of my case. My case is more complicated, and I do not know all the answers. And maybe some of my listeners actually can fill in the details. Because certainly, what actually happened during, this time, and I speak about the 1990s, had international implications and affected all sorts of nations. So I admit this is like there are several riddles here, and that I cannot give you the answers for, and maybe some of my listeners even know much better than I am, or can fill in, it actually means filling, the missing parts of the puzzle. But it should be said that it's not incredibly important for this series, because again, this series does not. In this series, I do not want to speak, to describe specific people of interest, and not even my own life. What I want to do is to shed light on a political phenomenon of tremendous importance, but I must do it using actual examples, because again, otherwise this will be just like an empty discussion. I must give names and places and things that actually happen. Just so it will be some kind of something of an essence, with flesh and blood, not just it's a theoretical construct. And the only kind of examples that I give that are of essence are examples for my own life. So that's why I spoke about my own life, and I will speak about my own life. And under those circumstances, the zombies are as I said, their voice generation capabilities are impressive, really impressive. That's of an opera singer. You hear how they are expert in that. The best of the best. בחורינו המצוינים. So, what I want to say now is there is more questions and answers with regards to it, of how I became part of this phenomenon. Because it wasn't just a mistake, or just they wanted to fill the ranks, of a class or something, or unit with extra people that do not belong to it, and with them never have any ability to know about it. Something else happened of international implication, and I do not. So I will briefly now in this video I'll briefly mention, what happened in the general sense. And I'll also explain, how is it fundamentally different than the usual course of events of the Game of Thrones phenomenon. But it will keep many questions will be left, unanswered, and probably because I just can't answer those questions. And in the next video, I'll actually discuss high school and junior high, with the actual, speak about, what happened, people and things like that. So the usual cause of this phenomenon is that these people, as I said, in 21 Jump Street, they just lose years and they start high school, from from the 9th class or something like that. They started in Israel. And their biography is faked, and it's very easy to fake a biography of any person, let alone child, that is presumably, סיים כיתה ח', just finished the 8th grade. There is not much to fake. The main problem is not how to create a fake identity of such a person. It's incredibly easy because what's the problem? It's not even a person of any age, it's incredibly easy to fake the biography of any kind of a person. But certainly for a child, just finish the 8th or the 6th or the 7th or the 8th grade, it's incredibly easy. The only kind of problem is how you introduce the child into society without the neighbors asking questions. And this is solved by the fact that the neighbors are part of the intelligence. These neighborhoods, they live in neighborhoods that are all part of the intelligence community. So it's not a problem at all, because the neighbors don't ask questions because they are of the type that do not ask questions. That's this is a defining characteristics of the people that take part in the Game of Thrones political phenomenon is exactly that they do not ask questions. This is, one of the major characteristics is precisely that they do not ask questions. And besides the neighborhood, who else, I mean, we can ask questions? I mean, this is like, it's a child, you know, it's just a child. But this is not what happened in my case. First of all, I'm not a pedophile, and I was born in Israel, and my biography is exactly what I remember it is. But moreover, the entire class was different. This was a different case. And some of it is, I mean, some of the things they said now are identical to the Game of Thrones, you know, typical things that happen, you know, for people that take place in the Game of Thrones phenomenon. Some of it are very different. Because something else happened. Something very different actually happened. What actually happened is that a batch of people, of such people, I mean, like a class of such people, I mean, was constructed, all from from Tel Aviv or the vicinity of Tel Aviv, like Hulon, even Lud, Ramat HaSharon, and this is kind of like, I mean, this area, I mean, you know, most of the people in Israel live in this area, so I mean, it kind of like, I mean, this kind of like, I mean, just I mean, the majority of the people, so I mean, it's like it's a huge pool of population, so I mean, it was easy, I mean, to construct like a class of such people, and another thing is they are all vaguely related to like Datim, Leumim, but in a very vague way, and I will speak about it in the next chapter. It was not at all a typical like modern Orthodox or Kippot Srugot class, not at all. They only needed to be some way related, you know, in a very vague way related to it. It was not like a chinuch, like it was not the usual Datim Leumim, not at all, not at all. Only in like very shallow face value, but not in any deep way, even remotely so. This was one of the main characteristics of this class. That, I mean, presumably they belong to the strata of society that are called Datim Leumim, and that they have many characteristics. But almost none of these characteristics were manifested by the people and their families. Almost none. There was a huge gap between the actual people and their families and the supposed, I mean, strata of society that they belong to. Because Datim Leumim is a known thing in Israel, and there is much to be said about them. You know, I remember now there's like a term that I think Moti Kot, I mean, friend of my brother, I mean, coined, like, I mean, דתיים מלאומיים ועושי דברם, או או הדתיים מלאומיים איך זה הולך הביטוי? It's like, I mean, like based on the, like, it's like a paraphrase of like הנאצים ועושי דברם, like something that many people, like in Hebrew they say that הנאצים ועושי דברם, presumably like there were not just that Nazis, but also other nations that should be treated almost like Nazis when we are, I mean, we want to kind of like, you know, to remember how people owe us because they mistreated us so badly. It's not just the Germans, but also עושי דברם. So, אני דתיים מלאומיים ועושי דברם. So yes, there is much to be said about the Datim Leumim, but it should be said that these are not the people, I mean, of my high school and junior high, not at all. Almost anything that you can say about the Datim Leumim, and I have much to say about the Kippot Srugot, mostly or almost exclusively bad things about this population, and that are hated by God. These are not the people who are, I mean, of my, you know, of my high school and junior high. No, should be said, no. I mean, I have much to say about this population and mostly hateful things, but not by the fact that that's like, I mean, that's my upbringing. Not at all. Should be said, not at all. This is a mistaken, like, I mean, interpretation of reality that, I mean, it's maybe expected, but not because, I mean, presumably, רנועים בית ג' צייקלין, תיכון ששייך לציונות הדתית מאז ומעולם, ואפילו היה פעם נחשב תיכון מאוד מובחר בציונות הדתית, עם במת הבוגר, מביאים כל פעם איזשהו, אני לא יודע, איזה אלוף, או אני לא יודע, איזה שופט, או ליצן רפואי, כל מיני דמויות, אתם יודעים, of like high magnitude, I mean, that, I mean, you know, that studied in Zeitlin, and, you know, because in the past it was known to be, before integration started, like as a political project, So, during the 50s, the 60s, up to the 70s even, up to the 80s, but for a long, long time it was known like to be in high school of like flagship of the Tzionut Hadatit, and we will speak a lot about Ashkenazim and Sfaradim in the discussion of cycling. So, if you're offended by this kind of discourse, skip this episode, but also the next one, because this will be a main issue. So I'm sorry if you're offended, but we cannot discuss cycling without speaking about Ashkenazim and Mizrahim. This is a major topic and was always have been. But in the first decades of the state, the topic of Ashkenazim and Mizrahim in cycling was manifested by the fact that there were only Ashkenazim in cycling. This was the first stage of the drama that was always very important in cycling, always. It still is, to the best of my knowledge. But in the first couple of decades, the solution to the problem, there was always a problem about it. And I will discuss this in the next video. But I just say that in the first couple of decades, the solution to the problem was that they only accept Ashkenazim, and it was actually a great solution because it was it was considered a very high quality high school during this time. So the solution actually worked great. Arguably, some might beg to differ, but that was the solution to the problem that is like exists. It's almost like an existential problem in this school. But let's speak about it in the next episode. Just to say that this school was considered for a long time a flagship of the Tzionut Hadatit, certainly in Tel Aviv and in the center area, and an interesting alternative to the Yeshivot HaTichoniot. But maybe we'll discuss it later. What I wanted to say is that all of this is in no way related to my class and to the people of my class. It's like, this is it's not the people at all. So if you think you know something about cycling, maybe you've heard about it, maybe you listened, you remember something. Mostly what you think you know about cycling, not relevant at all to my class and my experiences and my upbringing. There was a huge gap between, what you could have thought about these people and what they really were. And this was evident to me from the first days, even as a child. So just to say, I can speak all night about how much God hates the Tzionut Hadatit, but it will not be because of the fact that I grew up in the Tzionut Hadatit, because it's not exactly correct. It's not exactly correct. It's actually much more complicated than that. These were different people. Now, what actually happened is more elaborate or much more complicated than the usual. The usual thing is that they create classes of these people, and they just start high school. But what actually happened in our case is different, because what actually happened in our case is that yes, they created a class, and this started not in high school but in junior high, in the year 1995. In junior high, like Kita Zayin, 7th grade. And this class, yes, they were made of the material of the Game of Thrones situation. But instead of faked identities, they replaced actual people. Like each of them, like Daniel Lasri, Gabi Yakovson, Lior Badichi, each of these people was actually a replacement for another person, for another Lior Badichi, Gabi Yakovson, Daniel Lasri. Besides me. I was just me. So where are the, so where is Daniel Lasri and Gabi Yakovson and Lior Badichi? Same could be asked about the girls, not only the boys. Because again, this was a separated high school, but with classes, both for girls and for boys. That's why it's called Ironi Bet Gimel, because presumably it's like two high schools that are merged together. Even though it's the same high school, just different buildings and different classes for boys and girls, but we meet each other, in the outside, or in the library, and they can speak a little bit. Unlike, the people of the yeshivot, the boys in the yeshivot atechoniot that are, sometimes people from the yeshivot atechoniot of Tel Aviv, they have fun day, in cycling. They just go to the cycling just in order to see, females. Because it's the age, they're 13, 14, 15, they're it's like you are all of you are just flooded with hormones, and there are no girls around, just like boys. So they just go to cycling, presumably for meeting friends, or I don't know, I don't know. But what I actually want is just to watch to watch females of their age. True story. יש ישיבה תיכונית, שכחתי כבר את השמות, בר אילן, ויש ישיבה תיכונית, מה יש חוץ מבר אילן? In the center, in תל אביב, לא זוכר. So yes, the same question could be asked about, Yehudit Genetic, or what was, the female names, Shirley Aran, maybe we'll do naming, naming. No, Yehudit is not the true. No, sorry, Yehudit she didn't study in cycling, but Shirley Aran studied in cycling. Yifat Avidar studied in cycling. Admittedly, I have less. I remember names of the girls. Less than of the boys, because I didn't study the same class, and during primary school, I mostly played soccer, in the Bapsaka. So as was our way, just to play soccer. You don't really think about So, but same question could be asked about these as well. Because they were also replaced. So where are the originals? שכחו אותי בבית. And also, why didn't they took me with them? If they went to a good place, maybe it means all for the best. I don't know where they went. Maybe שכחו אותי בבית, home alone, Okay, so we'll finish this video here, and in the next video we'll actually speak about my days in cycling in high school and junior high, and so this is this was kind of the basis of of my own experience, the circumstances of how this kind of episode in my life started. But yes, as I said, this leaves many open questions, and I don't necessarily have the answer for that. And certainly this is peculiar. It wasn't like that it's not traditionally like that for the Game of Thrones phenomenon. The traditional thing is they just invent new identities, and the neighbors don't ask questions because they belong to the group of society that does not ask questions, and that's it. Very, very easy. But what happened here is something tremendously more complicated. Okay, so I'll upload this video now, and maybe drink something and eat something, and then we'll continue with the discussion of the actual days in cycling between the years 1995 and 2001.